If your friend says to you, how can you trust that a book that old is accurate, what might you say? Charmaine.
Okay. So, wait.
We're on number 1, you know that, right?
Number of manuscripts. So.
Oh yes, okay, that's a good point.
The New Testament, there's over 24,000 ancient New Testament manuscripts, dating from the 2nd century AD to the 8th century AD. So it's like it has much more manuscripts than the other ancient texts of history.
Yes.
And so the number of manuscripts is a key piece to determining accuracy because why? Why is it a key piece? How many manuscripts there are?
Because then you can...
Because there are more copies to compare and detect errors.
Yes, exactly. Okay, Nikki.
And the second key is like, if you put two different things like an ancient text of, you'd say,
Plato?
Plato, yeah, sorry. Plateau. Then you can compare it to what we were looking over by just like, so what you do is you look how accurate the time is to when they wrote it, how timely it is to the author.
Yeah, to the author, right. And so the New Testament documents have a very short time span between the original document and the oldest copy we have. That'll be enough, Chris. Yes, go ahead, Ashton.
Like how close they were and how like the comparison, so many people put so much like work into like copying them down and like comparing them to the oldest ones that they have, and
Right.
like how close they were to the date.
Now, what specifically in terms of copying could we use as a factoid for accuracy? Besides, so many people put so much time into copying them and comparing them. That seems very like a very general statement. What kind of factual nugget can we pull out of that, Claire?
That when they are compared, that the original and the modern day text that we have, it's like 95 or 97% accuracy between the two, and those 5% or 3% of errors lies mostly in like grammar or misspelling. Like the errors don't pertain to like the theme or the message.
Right.
And
right.
so it doesn't actually, the errors don't affect it. So
Right.
they're still like the same ones that they had.
Right, good. Is there something that we aren't talking about the copying process though, the Old Testament, that contributes to accuracy?
Right here.
Nick.
So in the copying process, the Jewish people would, if they mess something up, they just throw it right out.
Why?
Because it was so sacred.
Sacred.
And they would burn it if they messed up.
Right.
And it would get old.
Right. So, and give me some more detail about how they knew whether or not they made a mistake. What did they do to ensure that they didn't make mistakes? Charmaine.
They counted the number of lines, columns, and they guided every meticulous aspect from the materials used.
Yeah. So if they didn't have the right number of lines, the right number of columns, the right number of words, they already knew that there was a mistake. They didn't just go by whether or not they like spelled it wrong or something, or an editor pointed it out. They're like, oh, must be missing a word because we don't have enough lines here. Ceremonially burned, buried, because you can't have a sacred document with mistakes in it. Yeah.
So, we talked about this earlier, about the difference between copying and translating.
Yeah.
And wasn't it in the New Testament where we were translating?
Well, the Bible has been translated into, did anybody do research on how many different languages the Bible's been translated into? All of them. No.
Not quite the originals.
Close, okay.
It's hundreds.
No,
It's a lot.
It's like a
30.
like just over 100.
No. Someone in another class had this research. 2,700 different languages.
That's basically
Oh, yeah.
No, there's still unreached people groups. So
We don't know about them.
the difference between copying and translate, so the whole entire Bible has been translated into those languages. And so when a translation is made, it always, if it's a legitimate translation, it's always translated from the original Hebrew for the Old Testament or the original Greek for the New Testament into that language. So for instance, it wouldn't be original Hebrew into English and then translate the English into Swahili. That's not how it would be. It would be the original Hebrew into Swahili, the original Greek into Swahili. And so you have to have a scholar that understands both the Hebrew and Greek and the Swahili language in order to have a proper translation. So this book has been translated into 2,700 something languages.
Wow.
I don't know where that many languages.
Well, when you think about, like, I was in Africa and I was in Uganda, and in the time that we were there, we encountered, I don't know, 3 different people groups with 3 different languages, all in Uganda right where we were. You know what I mean? And so there's dialects in different countries of, you know,
Aren't dialects basically the same language,
but in different variations.
Yeah.
So you've got to have, but the dialects can be very different from one another. So you have to have a whole other translation.
Spanish.
Yeah.
Is like from Spain, Spanish, and then there's like Mexico Spanish.
And then there's like
And
Mandarin,
there's like American
Chinese,
Sure.
Spanish.
Cantonese.
Well,
Yeah, so they can understand each other.
No, but they're really different.
Oh, no.
So many.
Hey, stop sidebarring. Chris, can you move over a little bit so I can see you? Okay, go ahead, Gavin.
Like a very prime example of a dialect would be Portuguese, and then the Portuguese that they speak in Brazil. Like if you know Portuguese, you can say some things like it's based on Portuguese, but you can't like have like a fluid conversation.
So you would need a whole other translation
Yes.
for those different dialects, and that's true for a lot of different languages. It really is. So what does that tell you that this book has been translated into so many
That
different
means a big deal to everybody in the world.
Well, it might feed into this second question. If your friend says to you there's a ton of holy books, what makes the Bible the one that's definitely inspired by God? Ashton.
It's unity, like that it was written on
What's
like
that?
40 different authors, like 3 different continents, and then over the course of 1,500 years, like that can't just magically
If it
fall
all
into place.
falls in the same theme, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it
so
all
I mean,
has
you
the
can
same-
have a collection of books that are all written by that way, but they aren't gonna all be unified
Right.
necessarily.
And it
okay?
never contradicts itself at all.
We're gonna stop the discussion here and pick up again on Friday.
Not Thursday?
Says to you, how can you trust that a book that old is accurate? Did we do this one? Okay.
You're in the middle of it.
We were in the middle of it. Does somebody else have something they want to say on that point? Because so far I don't have a lot of people participating in this
Well, I said
discussion.
my.
Okay, you go ahead.
I'll say it's proved to be accurate through the pastor criticism. So Bible is proved to be 97% accurate to the original text.
97%. And then did anybody else talk about textual criticism day before yesterday? About what are the two factors? Claire?
How many there are and how close it is to the authors. Like,
The original.
The original.
Yeah, right. How many copies we have and how close they are to the time. And for the New Testament, compared to other ancient documents, we have so many copies of the New Testament and such a short time span between the oldest copy and the original writing. What's the problem? Oh, so that when he goes around, he doesn't bump into it. Good. Okay. So any other reason why we can trust that a book that old is accurate? Can we cover that one with what we said today and what we said the day before yesterday? Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
We did talk about the amount of manuscripts. Like, so not only just giving the example of like talking about the 2 key reasons it's so accurate, but how many there are
Yeah.
is a big part.
Right. So, right. Okay, let's move on to number 2. If your friend says to you, there's a ton of holy books, What are some examples of holy books, by the way? Yeah?
Quran.
Quran is holy. What else is a holy book? Book of Mormon is a holy book. What else is a holy book?
Buddhist book?
Yeah. Do you know what it's called?
Veda.
No, Vedic literature, the Vedas are Hindu.
Gita.
The Buddhist, there's several books,
Peace
but
Walk.
one of them is called the Baghdad Vita.
The Mork.
Yeah.
The Mork. It's called the Mork.
No. So we've got a lot of holy books, a lot of ancient Chinese literature, but what is it, your friend says, so why would you say that the Bible is actually God's word? What might you say, Joseph?
Because the Bible is the only holy book that we found that has prophecies in it that are so specific and accurate. Because some holy books like they'll have specific prophecies, but they won't be that accurate. Or they'll have like accurate prophecies, but they'll be sort of vague. Like there was one that was from a memoir guy, Nostradamus.
Nostradamus. Did you do research on that? Did anybody do research on Nostradamus'
I know a little bit about
prophecies? You do. Can you film yourself?
No.
You can't spin it around and look at yourself?
No, I'm just not
That's
gonna.
really close.
Okay, you're just not gonna. Like you could, but you're not gonna.
I'll just be the commentary in the background.
Okay, be commentary in the background, and let's look at Charmaine as you are doing your commentary in the background.
Okay.
Charmaine.
Yeah, Charmaine!
Okay, quiet.
So Nostradamus he's a French prophet from the 15th, 16th century. He had a lot of different prophecies. I think one of them was about Hitler. I had a few that were about the Second World War. He had one, I think it was King Louis and his mistress running off, getting captured and being beheaded.
Yeah.
There's some interesting ones. Then I think there might have been one that was actually about the moon landing in 1969. Then there was another one that they thought was about 9/11, but turns out that one wasn't actually real. That one didn't
Now,
actually
when
read
you
one.
read his prophecies and then how people said that they're fulfilled, did it seem specific like biblical prophecy to you?
Oh, there were some things that were off. I mean, like the Hitler one, I think it had something about a river that the Nazis actually didn't go around. But
Well, it said something like the river Indus, and they said the river Indus is actually referring to Hitler. The river
Yeah.
will rise up, and then they said, okay, that refers to Hitler. So that's
Kind of
kind of an
stretch.
example, right, of how Nostradamus would write these things that were kind of general, and then people later would say, wait, that could mean this, and that could mean this.
yeah.
I'm just wondering, as you read those, did they seem as specific to you as, say, pierce my hands and feet, divide, cast lots for my clothing, that kind of thing that we read in Psalm 22?
Well, I don't remember exactly what they said, but and I don't recall them being super specific. But at the same time, I can't really think of anything else you could really apply it to in history.
Okay. Yeah, I would encourage you guys to compare other prophecies to biblical prophecies for specifics and accuracy and those kinds of things. Anybody else have a thought on this vein? Claire Strangen.
The unity throughout the book, it was written by 40 different authors over a span of 1,500 years and on 3 different continents, and it doesn't once contradict itself.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't happen.
So there's that supernatural element of one author, and not only is it different authors, different circumstances, different political situations, different purposes for writing, but they're also different genres, aren't they? What kind of biblical literary genres are there? Wisdom, poetry, history, prophetic. We've got epistles. What are epistles?
Letters.
Letters. Yeah.
Apostle?
Poetry, historical pieces, song.
There is such thing as an apostle.
Apostolic.
That's the word.
The books.
Gavin's
of
talking.
This gets for
These are all the genres. So
Oh, the genres.
So it's poetry, historical narrative, song, romance, didactic, treatise, personal correspondence, memoirs, satire, biography, autobiography, law, prophecy, parable, and allegory.
So all of those different genres, and still, we're all writing about the same thing. So there is, Claire, that's wonderful. There is a supernatural aspect to that. Like you take the Quran or the Book of Mormon, for instance. Do you guys know what the word Quran means?
I do.
Word of
God.
Anybody?
What do it mean?
You know what it
I
means?
used to, I can't remember.
It means recitings. So, because Muhammad had a vision saying that it was from the prophet Gabriel, and then Muhammad recited his vision and people wrote it down because Muhammad was illiterate. Same with Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith had a vision from the angel Gabriel. And then Joseph Smith recited his vision to people who wrote it down. So what's different between that and, say, the biographies